A little bit about us. We started in 2011. IGDC was the first local photography community to be created around Instagram. Our mission is to encourage people of all skill levels to get out of their house and explore the DMV through photography and alongside a community of friends and strangers. While the pandemic has restricted our ability to organize photo walks and events, we have continued daily features that show off the city, and we have been exploring other ideas that encourage creativity and photography through our stories. So please check that out. We have enjoyed working with the Phillips Collection on their Community in Focus project and hope you have too. So thank you very much, Phillips Collection, for including us. I'm now honored to introduce the supremely talented and gracious photographers, Birch Thomas and Angela Pan. I met both women through IGDC photo walks and have enjoyed getting to know them and their work over the past several years. They both have an incredible eye for framing the perfect photo and capturing the best details. If you know their work, you know what I'm talking about. Their mastery of the cameras are inspiring. I'm often blown away by what they produce, and I'm so thrilled they agreed to share their individual and collaborative process with us all today. As many of you can probably relate to, their work has changed and evolved through the challenges of the pandemic, and the results have been surprising and delightful to watch. Thank you both for joining us today and letting us explore process and emotion together. With that, please welcome Birch and Angela. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Good morning. Thank you for the intro, Holly. I appreciate it. And thank you, Miguel, on behalf of the Phillips Collection for having us. I know Angela and I have been working over the past week to pull together this presentation for you guys, and we're really excited to share it with you and take you through it. So just a little background on myself before we jump in. I have picked up my first camera about 5 years ago. So I was able to learn a little bit from my mom, who studied photography in art school, and I kept taking her camera and borrowing it all the time and going on photo walks by myself until finally she gave me my own camera in 2015. And so really my foundation started in going on walks around the DC area. I'm from here, and being able to capture the city from different perspectives and really through the changing of seasons, that was where my passion stemmed from. And over the past 2 years or so, I've really transitioned my career. I picked up a camera and I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life. And so I became a full-time freelance photographer this year officially, which is an interesting year to go freelance. But as Holly mentioned, my craft has really evolved this year. I think I started out the year trying to define who I am as a photographer. You know, am I more of someone who captures the city and does cityscapes and landscape work? But I found myself inside in March and having to get creative and try new things. So I really explored the world of food photography for the first time, which was a whole new outlet for me. And now I really am working on a lot of different things. So I think living in DC, naturally, my instinct has been to go out and dive into photojournalism and try and understand all the changes that are happening in our world right now. And so right now I do a mix of, portrait, food photography, a lot of commercial work. And Angela has been someone that I met in January 2018, and has really been just one of my closest friends in learning about the craft. And we love to go out on photo walks together. So she can tell you a little bit more about how we met, but Angela, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Birch, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'm really excited to be here and to share just all of our knowledge and things that we do to create successful images. So I started off in photography a little bit earlier in life. I signed up for a photography class in high school just because I thought it would be an easy A, and I figured why not? So I signed up for the class, and at that time it was all film photography. So I just remember being in the darkroom and developing my own images and developing my own negatives. And I specifically remember this time where my negatives had just finished drying, and I was waiting to go onto the light table to check them out to see how they all came out. And while I was waiting in line for this light table, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I just loved it so much from that first class. I took every photo class that I could ever since then. Even in college, I took them as electives. And even though there was like a period of time between college and, you know, professional life, there was a period of time where I put the camera down for a little bit. I always just had the passion. And so once I actually got my 9-to-5 job, I was like, this is not what I want to do. I just wanted to be creative. And so I just worked before work, after work, just always just trying to concentrate on the images that I could. So I would wake up for sunrise, photograph the National Mall, and do the same thing at sunset and just practice my craft over and over again. So since then, I'm lucky enough to have worked with some great magazines in the area, some art consultants, to license my work and sell prints of my images. I do a little bit of freelancing as well. Just every day in the photo life is different. And so it's really hard to just say it in one little nutshell of things, but it's just so much fun. And I'm so grateful to be doing this every day. Birch and I remember I had followed Birch. I don't remember how I started following her, but I was like, wow, this girl looks good. And so we actually met at the Architect House when IGDC was having a meetup there. And I saw her, I was like, I have to go introduce myself. And then since then, I think we just clicked and became friends and started going on photo walks and just really lean on each other to talk about photo, our experiences, our emotions through it all. And just this past year, we would meet up at protests and kind of digest it and discuss it all together, side by side as protest partners. And it's been really great. And I think that having that support system has really helped me get through this year as well.
Yeah, I echo that. I think having someone that you can text your photos to afterwards or to meet up with and to like feel safe and know that someone's nearby, and also just someone who knows you well that can help you kind of navigate the journey of being a photographer and how your creativity changes and what may have felt right at one time no longer feels like the work you want to be doing. And so we spend a lot of time talking through that together. When our go-to is to meet up for sunrise photo walks together, like every other week or so, as often as we can.
Yeah, it's a great way to start the day. So we're glad you're here joining us today. And here, Birch is going to talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so we put our heads together and we wanted to share some tips on photography that are a little bit more conceptual. It's not so much the technical aspects of photography, but there's so much more that happens with in terms of a photograph that is outside of just that moment that you're clicking the shutter button. And so what we have talked through when Holly kind of first presented the idea of partnering with the Phillips collection and this idea of community and focus, one thing that we can all relate to this year is just the everyday need to process the changes that are happening around us and the emotions that come with that, and how are we feeling collectively and individually, and just how what Angela and I have been able to do is use our cameras as a tool to really embrace the process of creativity and a tool to help us understand and observe the everyday. And there's so many beautiful moments in the everyday, and there are so many different things that you can set out to capture that have really helped us to as a release, more so than in prior years. And both of our journeys through this year have evolved so much in terms of how we use photography. So what to expect in this class is, obviously it's 2 parts. The second one is optional, but our goal is that we want you to feel inspired after this class to be able to pick up your camera or your phone and go out and try some new things. Give yourself permission to maybe take photographs of things that you haven't tried before. and also just kind of a peek into our creative process and the way we approach photography that is outside of some of the foundational principles of photography that we, are readily available if you would like to learn about those in terms of whether it's composition or lighting. Kind of going beyond that, and how for Angela and I, it is very much part of our lifestyle, and our approach to it is something that we're constantly evolving. So we want to share that with you. And then once you have heard, kind of, we put together, it's a dozen different tips that we've been able to brainstorm and pull together. It's hard to narrow down, but we want to kind of give you a creative assignment to then give it a try yourself in terms of some of the methods that we share. And then next Sunday, if you'd like, there's the option to engage in more of a roundtable discussion and share some of your work. And we'll give you more information about the assignment after that.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit on to what Birch said, we aren't giving any technical information about how to use your camera or iPhone or anything like that. But if you do have questions, we have our contact information at the end of the presentation that you feel free to email either one of us. We actually created a joint email, so I think that makes our friendship official now. But if you wanted to ask both of us, that you can email us at that email as well. And I just wanted to say that we have a handful of images that we wanted to share with you guys. And not all of these images were created in 2020. We felt like these are all of our processes that we practiced in this year, but we had some examples that may have worked better from previous years. And we just wanted to make sure we had the most meaningful and the most meaningful images that we could to present our ideas to you. So if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, or you feel free to email us, whatever you're most comfortable with. And same thing with the assignment. If you're comfortable with our assignment for next week, we would love to have an open table discussion with you guys. So let's go ahead with the presentation.
Yeah, let's jump in. So the first thing we want to talk about is how to visualize and prepare for the photos that you want to take. And part of this that Angela and I talk about a lot is your mindset. So this is something where whether you are taking photos of flowers, or you are taking photos of your family, or you are doing something that Angela and I do often this year is go out and capture some of the moments that are happening right here in DC that we've wanted to document. And part of visualizing your photos is, part of it is asking kind of, what kind of mindset am I in? It's not so much changing your mindset as being aware of the mindset you're in. Are you, and part of that is how you're feeling that day. Is there something that you're anxious about? Is there something that you're down about? Are you really excited about something? And also kind of understanding, is there anything that's really been on your mind? Is there something that has been kind of a recurring theme that you're noticing, and you really are drawn to, like that first example I gave of flowers? And if that is something that really speaks to you in terms of visualizing those photos, then go out and you can go on a photo walk and capture just flowers if you'd like. But part of visualization is on that kind of the spectrum of flowers to documenting a protest. You have to know what you're walking into. And when Angela and I have talked about this before, there's kind of a process we both go through of taking a moment to pause and think about the photos that we want to take that day. And particularly when you're walking into a situation maybe where it's unknown as to what the moments are going to be like that unfold in front of you. If you take some time to prepare yourself and really hype yourself up for a great photo shoot, then usually the results will match that preparation. And so I want to take you through a couple photos that are personal to me in terms of where I have visualized a photo. And that's very different than when you kind of take a walk around the block and let let moments unfold with every step that you take. So this is a photo that there's a photographer named Robert Llewellyn, and he was a DC-based photographer back in like the 60s and 70s, I believe. And he had an incredible photo of the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, and the Capitol all lined up perfectly. And when I saw the photo, I was like, wow, that's just a beautiful perspective. Where was it taken? And so, after some research, I realized you have to go to Roosevelt Island and park and take a sunrise walk. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to wake up like an hour before sunset. I'm going to get there early. I'm going to make sure I have enough time to set up and find a good spot. And I knew that I wanted mine to be a little bit different than his. But as soon as I got there, I realized like, oh, he had to have been in like an apartment building that was behind, on the other side of the road. And there was also, his lens had to have been like a 600 millimeter or something. And I had gone in and I thought it would be so amazing as part of speaking to DC when I was driving in. I was like, it would be incredible if some rowers would come by. And I remember the sun started to come up and I had visualized this shot. And when I got there, when I was met with a roadblock of like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get it, I still persisted. I was like, well, there's still something here for me. There's still something that from that visualization that I had, I didn't go through everything from setting my alarm to waking up early to going out in the cold, driving there, going on the walk to the little hike to get there, to show up empty-handed. And so it was kind of because I had visualized it and I had already told myself like, oh, this morning I'm about to take a beautiful sunrise photo. I didn't give up. And there was almost that moment where I walked away. And then as soon as I kind of looked back, I saw the rowers roll in. And it was a moment where, because I had then visualized it, I already had my camera settings, everything was ready to go, and I snapped it. And I remember I looked at the back of my camera and I was like, that's it. That was the photo that was like meant to unfold in front of me that day. So that was kind of one example of like bringing it to life. The next one, similar, a sunrise photo, and this is obviously pre-COVID, but it was one of the last flights I actually took before we were all, in quarantine. And this was something where I wanted to get a sunrise photo from the airplane window over the city. And it was a photo that, this kind of moment doesn't happen every time you take a flight, but I knew I was taking a trip up north and I wanted to get a seat on the right side of the plane so that I was going to have the perfect view of the city. I booked my flight at like 6 a.m. so that the sunrise was coming up. All these things that were built in as the preparation for the perfect shot that I wanted to get that morning. And when I arrived at the airport, I looked at my seat assignment that had changed and I was right on the wing. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be cranky if I get up in the air and all I have is a view of the wing and there's a beautiful sunrise happening. So I had that moment where I was like, I thought about, let me go up to the counter and just ask, could you put me in the back of the plane so that I have a view? And I hesitated. I didn't want to be that person that was asking to switch, but it had been about a month that this photo was in my mind. And I said, just do it. And so I went up and she was more than happy to move me into some empty seats. And we took off, and actually the pilot rounded the city and kind of changed the flight path. And I had never seen this perspective of the Capitol before, but right as we took off, the sun had already peeked over the horizon, and I saw the sunbeams, and I had my camera in my lap and I was ready. Like, I had visualized the shot. I had done everything to prepare and remove the roadblocks. And then when I was presented with that moment, I was able to capture it. And this, in looking at it, just seeing it on Instagram, you may have thought like, oh, I was sitting there with my camera on my lap and I snapped the photo, and it was just right place, right time. But there was so much more thought and effort that went into it before that. So just a little bit of advice on how to visualize and prepare for photos that you want to be photos that are in your archive.
So our next tip is to remain present, to heighten all of your senses. And what I mean by that is to put your earphones away, zip up your cell phone in your backpack or your purse or something like that. If you're taking pictures with your cell phone, maybe putting on airplane mode just so that you have no distractions and you can use all of your senses to take photos, like your hearing, your sight, your touch, everything. It's something so nice about just, even if you're taking a casual walk around your neighborhood, somewhere where you look at and see every single day, but when you're taking a walk in your neighborhood with your camera, you just see and notice things that you would have never noticed before. It's just something about carrying your camera that you just start noticing things different. So while you're walking around and having your photo walk, I like to think about different things, two things that help me remain present. What made me pick up my camera today? There's usually two main reasons for that. Am I trying to tell a story, or is there a purpose of why I myself needed it? Maybe it's because I'm feeling really emotional from the things that I'm seeing on the news or on social media about what's going on in my backyard, and I wanted to go out there and see it for myself. Or I'm trying to tell a story of someone who is at that event, or sometimes when I'm in a bad mood personally or just not feeling well, sometimes I just need to release that anger or that frustration outdoors, fresh air, with a camera in hand, and just, you see new things all the time when you're out. So I just wanted to give this example of images that I captured last year in New York City in October. This was our last day that we were in New York, and somehow, for some reason, whenever we visit New York, we always end up in Chinatown. It's just something that is very familiar to me, and being a Chinese American living in America, I just feel so, I can relate so much, and I feel so happy and just kind of like I'm at home when I'm walking down the street and I hear people speaking in Mandarin Chinese. And so for me to walk around and have the sounds of New York City and hearing a different language that I'm used to on a typical day, and just eating the foods that I love eating and going there, was just something so special to me. So this was just images that I captured within a 15-minute walk from where I parked my car to where we were going to go to dim sum. And since it was raining, I knew that I really wanted to remain present of what was in front of me, and to make sure I can capture the images that I wanted to efficiently. Just because it was raining and I didn't want to get wet, I didn't want to get my camera and my equipment wet. And so I was really present of making sure every photo counted. And I wanted to tell a story of what it was like for me on just that quick 15-minute walk. I was by myself. I had dropped off my family off in front of the restaurant while I went to go park the car. And these were just all the scenes that I saw in front of me. I just love photographing in the rain, just because I think umbrellas make it so much more interesting and another element into your image. And I especially love the hairdressers in the third image, just because whenever my mom and we go visit Taiwan, we always go to get our hair washed. It's just something that we do whenever we go to the hair salon in Taiwan. So all of these images are just so personal to me. And this is the story that I wanted to tell on that 15-minute walk. So remaining present is just thinking about why you picked up your camera that day, either the story that you wanted to tell, or there's a purpose, either letting out your emotions, figuring out the emotions that you're trying to feel, what you're seeing in the stories, or whatever it is. There's always a reason why you picked up your camera. And I just wanted to leave you off with this quote that I found. It says, "We are making photographs to understand what our lives mean to us." And it's just either the story or the purpose of your photo walk that day.
So the next kind of layer to the cake here is, if you think about, you've already visualized the shot, you've prepared, you're out with your camera, you feel present, you've eliminated the distractions. One of the most important things then is to follow your intuition, follow your gut instincts, and to trust we said, trust your creativity and trust your instincts, but we all know what it's like to kind of have that little intuitive voice in us that guides you on your walk. It explains why you decide to go to a certain park, or why you decide to, maybe check out something that caught your eye. If you're present, then you can be extremely in tune with your intuition and letting it guide you through your photo journey that day. And there's a difference between being by yourself and being with other people when you're taking pictures. When it's just yourself, you don't have any other energy that's coming in and kind of telling you to let's all go this way. And there's a time and place for what you're in the mood for that day. But I know this year in 2020, there have been so many times where I have picked up my camera, put on my mask, put my phone on do not disturb, and gone out to take pictures, and I have no idea what I'm about to take pictures of, but I let my intuition guide me through the left and right turns that I want to make that day. And it's fun. It's like a relationship you start to develop with your intuition when it comes to your creative eye. And I say a lot, you'll hear me say, let the moments unfold in front of you a lot. And I think it's because I have personally experienced that happen so many times, where I will touch on resistance later, but I have resisted picking up my camera and going out to shoot. And I'm met with moments that are just exactly what I needed that day. And it's one of my favorite things about taking pictures. So I want to take you through a couple examples of that, where this first one is a moment where I didn't even want to go out and take pictures this day, but it was sunset and two friends wanted to catch the sunset at the Capitol. So I was like, sure, let's go. I got my camera. And they started walking towards the Capitol, but I felt like this pull. It was an immediate pull to stay back on East Capitol Street. And so I was like, I'm going to hang back. Like, you guys go ahead. I'll meet up with you. And I started to, I guess I was right around like between 3rd and 4th Street. And I started walking closer to the Capitol, and I heard these motorcycles pull up along on my right side. And when I saw that there was about a dozen motorcycles, I immediately was just like, whoa, like something's about to happen. I wasn't sure why they were all here, but they actually lined up on East Capitol Street. So my natural reaction was, sprint, run, get to within like 1 or 2 blocks of the Capitol. And my gut didn't say like, try and take their picture on the street. It was wait and watch and see what is about to happen. And as soon as I got to within about 2 blocks of the Capitol, they all lined up perfectly in formation. And I was able to like, because I think it was in combination, because I was so present, but also I was really in tune in that moment and listening to my gut instincts say, hang back, listen, wait for the moment. And this moment it was something that, 30 minutes before I was sitting on my couch, I could have never envisioned this moment happening. But because I went out, because I listened to my instincts say like, stay back, I was able to capture this moment. And it was one of my favorite photos that I've taken to date, probably. So what's interesting about then, if you continue on the path of following your intuition, what I noticed was catching my eye this week was repetition. And I kept having moments where I was very aware of repetition being present in my photos. And so if you go to the next photo, Angela, it was about 4 days later that I had already, I was already kind of over the moon with some of the photos I had taken that week, where I took a photo of some row houses that showed repetition, the police on motorcycles in front of the Capitol. And then this was actually a sunrise at the White House that Angela and I met up pre-COVID. Obviously, they do not have face masks on, but Angela and I met up, and she was walking towards me, and we were still kind of at a distance where we weren't talking yet, but I was off to the side and I saw out of the corner of my eye, I saw like a dozen yellow t-shirts. And immediately, because I was in tune with the fact that repetition was on my mind all week, I noticed the yellow shirts, and I had about 3 seconds to decide what I was going to do. And so I was not positioned square in front of the White House like this, but within those like 3 to 5 seconds, I knew, okay, I need to change positions. They're moving fast, so I need to change my camera settings I was bumping up my shutter speed and adjusting the exposure as I ran over to square myself with the White House. And this was the first photo I snapped. And it was a moment where I was like, Angela, I'll talk to you. I'll see you in a minute. And I had already kind of been in touch with what I was drawn to that week. And I was following my instincts in the moment to be able to do multiple things at once, where as you practice, you start to put these things into practice, it becomes instinctual as to how to reposition your body, change your camera settings, and think about the frame all in like 3 to 5 seconds. And so it was a good week for photos. I had a great time really following my intuition and letting these moments present themselves. And then the last thing on intuition, just to bring this to this summer, was, it's okay. Was these 3 photos. I took them all within about 30 minutes, but this was when the protests were occurring on a daily basis in June after the murder of George Floyd. And Angela and I were out there capturing as much as we could. And that was the first time this year that I had really stepped out with my camera and left the radius of being pretty close to my house. But on the tip here of follow your intuition, Angela and I were capturing some moments at Black Lives Matter Plaza, and it was tense. The energy was very tense, but it was also very uplifting and helped us to process everything that was happening. And there were some incredibly beautiful, meaningful moments. But both of us at the same time had this feeling that was like, it's time to go home. Like it was our intuition kicked in and was like, yep, we've gotten some photos. We've made some incredible connections. We even ran into photographers that we knew. But it was time to go. And we don't question that. You have to trust it. If you know to listen to that inner voice, then you know it's there to protect you too. And within a couple minutes, we had stepped out of the crowd and we were walking, I guess that's like 8th Street there. We were walking down the street, and this was right when the day that the peaceful protesters were tear gassed. And we got to the end of the block and we looked back and we could see the tear gas. And we had just left that moment and really were protected from that. And we both just kind of looked at each other and we were like, wow, it's, that time and time again, if you listen to your intuition, it's going to get louder. And I chose these 3 photos because the woman here on the left, she had to have been in her 80s or 90s. And this was the first photo I took once we got out of the crowd, because she was standing there at the end of the block to show her support. And she obviously, is high risk and had to observe and participate and show support from a distance. But it was just so, in the moment, it really felt so impactful to see the support and the range of people that were out there. And then just the next 2 was I saw this frame of what was written on the wall, and I saw the shadows and the light that really spoke to me. And I stood there just for a few minutes waiting for a stride by to happen. And then this was one of the nights we had with the helicopter, one of the nights we had curfew. And living in DC, it's been really interesting to experience all of that has happened in the city this year, and documenting just the helicopter and like that sound that became such a recurring sound for many weeks. That was something that I got on my walk home, and I was thankful to have gotten out of that moment of the tear gas.
So our next tip is to choose your background to build your story. When you go out on your photo walks or photo shoots, I really encourage you to slow down and just take in your surroundings. If each image is a story that you want to tell, when you think about literary stories, there's always like a person, a place, a conflict, and the resolution. But this is your place. This is how you establish context into your image, and it's just essential to tell the story in your photograph. I like to do this by figuring out my framing prior to any action happening, having that all set up, composed correctly, all my settings correct into the image, and just kind of wait for, and frame the background, and just kind of wait for some kind of action or something to come to me while I have my background already all set up. So this image I took earlier this year, I think it was January at Winterfest for the Nats. And so the background is obviously Nat Stadium. There's the team store there with the logo. So that gives you context as to where I am. And when I choose my background, I already have in mind the layers that I want to create. So I have my background, I have my midground, I have my foreground. So the background is the stadium. The midground are the participants of Winterfest, and then the picture, obviously. And I just waited for that foreground moment to come. They were just throwing the ball at children to, hit the ball with the bat. And so this child had just hit the bat, and I knew he was coming straight in front of my camera. So I just waited for that perfect frame to frame everything that was going on. I think my favorite unexpected moment of this image is the little girl with her hands on her hips, just waiting. I don't know exactly what emotion that is, but she's just waiting for her time to participate in the game. So I had my background all ready for the shot to go. And in this image, this was one of the days, I think this was a Monday evening that I captured this image. It was a little bit quieter than any of the protests that I had gone to over the weekend and things like that. And the fence outside of the White House was just being plastered with everyone's posters, and everyone just kept on saying how all these posters kind of created a new art gallery in Washington, D.C. So I really took that into consideration, and I just loved how everyone was just taking their time looking at all the slogans or the artwork or just all the words that other people were expressing during this time. This was in the beginning or middle of June when I captured this image. And I think that for this image in particular, if these two girls were standing anywhere else, if they were standing like at a beach, or if they were standing just directly in front of the White House itself, it wouldn't give as much meaning to the image. Being able to see their backs and just how they're kind of soaking everything in on what's going in front of them, and you can read what they're looking at and see everything. It really just adds more context to your images and more context to your stories to better tell your story. So you don't have to verbally say it, it's all visually represented right there. So when you're thinking about your background, also think about your layers too. I just love adding background, midground, and foreground into each of these images.
All right, so in photography, I'm sure you're familiar with the decisive moment, but something I want to talk about is how to anticipate the decisive moment. Like, what does that feel like? And what does that process look like? And when I think about this, there's really a trust that happens where you have to have patience and trust in the moment that is going to be the photo that is exactly what you want to take. And so the decisive moment is when you are going in and you're trying to find kind of someone looking at their phone, someone walking by the frame, someone checking the time, someone giving that perfect expression in a portrait. It's, I think, something that has really evolved for me in my journey. And before, I used to set my camera on continuous, and I would just take as many photos as possible and hope that one came out. And like if I saw a scene happening, and I've really evolved from that mentality of like, I'm going to miss the moment, let me take as many photos as possible, to the mentality of being patient and being present and really searching in that moment for the photo that only you know is the photo that was like the right one. It's really a feeling, and it's hard to describe, but if you've felt it, you know what I'm talking about. It's when you look at the back of through your photos on your phone, or you have taken, hit the shutter button on your film camera, or you are looking at the back of your camera and reviewing your images. It's a feeling of like, that shot, that was it. That was the one that did it for me and captured exactly what I was trying to capture. And so one thing I think is kind of an interesting question to ask yourself is, when looking back and taking photos, what were the times that you lost track of time? When you are searching for a subject, or you are going out just for a photo walk by yourself, like, what are the things where you lost track of time and you were fully immersed in the moment, and it allowed you to then be present and find those decisive moments and create those memorable photographs that are the ones that you're really proud of? And so what I want to share with you is a couple images and talk you through my decisive moment through each of these. And a lot of it, I kind of started with, it's trust and it's patience. And the reason I say that is because there's a feeling when I'm looking through my viewfinder of, I'm not thinking about anything else that's happening in life. I'm not thinking about, I'm aware of my surroundings, obviously, but it's a supreme like focus on however I have framed something, and waiting for that perfect moment and that action that's going to then tell me like, okay, now is the moment to push the shutter button. And so with the first example of the reporters at the White House, this is election night on November 3rd. And Angela and I went down, we met up for election night. And I remember walking up to, thankfully I live about a 20-minute walk from the White House. And I was walking there and I was like, what am I about to, walk into? Well, I didn't know what to expect. And that's kind of the feeling that was there when we got there, was everyone trying to look around and look at one another and get visual cues and emotional cues from one another as to how everyone was feeling. And you could just feel the uncertainty in the air. And so what I wanted to capture was that feeling. I wanted to capture the energy of everyone feeling like they were just looking at their watches, and it was just like the longest night. And so I found these two reporters. I knew that I wanted to frame the background to have the White House blurred out. I noticed the Secret Service on the roof per usual, but there were a lot more present that night. And I wanted to frame them to give context, because there were a lot of reporters that were just closer to like K Street, and they were scattered throughout, but these two were positioned square in the middle of Black Lives Matter Plaza. And what I did was I positioned myself, and I probably stood there for like 5 minutes, just looking through my viewfinder and waiting for them to do something that would symbolize that night. And that trust in knowing that that moment was going to happen is what kept me there. It kept me frozen in my tracks, just waiting. And that patience, then again, to have the presence of looking through the viewfinder and waiting for that moment to happen. And when the man on the left pulled out his phone and the gentleman on the right checked his watch at the same time, I was like, that was it right there. And there's a kind of like a moment where you're like, all right, I got it. I can leave now. I can walk away. The second one is to Angela's point of before, when you go out and you choose a background, a lot of times if you are trying to, tell a story or communicate an emotion you're feeling that day and you choose your background first, then you're just waiting for someone to enter your frame. And that subject could be a range of things. It could be a car, it could be a person, it could be a dog. That's kind of the fun part, is you don't know what's going to happen. And so I saw these shadows on the ground and I was like, oh, I have to capture these. And all the streets were closed. This was November 7th, the day that everyone was celebrating Biden. And I shouldn't say everyone, but in the city, there was an energy of celebration. And I saw the shadows and I was like, well, I'm just going to camp out here on the median for a little bit and wait until something happens. So it was that anticipation of the decisive moment where I framed it. And there was a policeman that came through on a motorcycle. There was some girls that walked by, and I probably sat there for like 15 minutes and I was like, I haven't gotten it. That wasn't it. And so, when this gentleman walked by, I saw him coming up from the underpass on my left with a huge flag that he was waving. I was like, yeah, this is the moment. And there's something about the intersection of the lines and the shadows and light, and then the presence of that gentleman with the large flag that just really, I knew in that moment that was the decisive moment for me. And then lastly, this was one of my favorite photos from that day. This couple had incredible energy, and I had probably like 10 seconds or so to anticipate the decisive moment here for this frame. And that was because I saw them up at the top of the hill before, I was down a little bit lower than them, but they were at the top of the hill, and there was a lot of photographers taking their portrait because, they were walking around with flags on their backs. And I saw that they started to run, and I knew rather than being up at the top and capturing them from above, I wanted to position myself to capture them going through the underpass. So I started running when I saw them, and I ran down. I got down on my knees. As I was running, I changed my shutter speed to be able to capture the action. And I was crouched down, just waiting for them to run by before they were even like halfway down. So by the time that they passed my right side and they went in front of me, I took like 2 or 3 photos of them, and this was one of them. And so it was almost like I had taken a minute just to pause and not react and think through, like, what is the decisive moment that is about to present itself, and be able to really to capture it. And so this is just some words, whether it's your cell phone or it is your camera. Really, it's one of my favorite feelings in the world of just having my camera up to my eye, and all I can hear is like my heartbeat and my breath, and I'm waiting for that perfect moment. And it's one of those moments where you've completely lost track of time, and all you can feel is like very present in that moment. And so it's something in this year, like observing the life around you and finding those moments of connection and relatability and understanding and processing the world around you, just to take time to observe life through the viewfinder.
So pre-COVID, I feel like I was out taking landscape pictures all the time. I'm known as a photographer who just loves sunrise, and I do. I love waking up early and capturing the beautiful sky. But there are some things to be said with the details that you can get in the shots, especially Birch and I are from the Washington, D.C. area, and this area is just so iconic. Being able to capture our landscape and the National Mall specifically in a different way really brings a new point of view and an interesting image for your viewer to look at. So I like to practice photographing wide, as in photographing the whole entire landscape, and then focusing in on the details. So photographing them wide to establish a scene, and then develop intimacy through close-ups. So this image I captured on a foggy summer morning, and this is in Manassas, and these two images were taken within footsteps of each other. They were so close, but I just had two different lenses with me. I had my wide angle lens and I had my macro lens. And you don't necessarily need a macro lens to get a close-up, but that was the only way that I would have been able to capture this little cricket guy. But you can see how these two images, even though they're so close to each other, so in proximity, that they look so different for your viewer, even though they were taken at exactly the same time. So this wide angle shot is just the context of where you are, and then the close-up is more intimate and emotional. And instead of zooming with your lens, I like zooming in with my legs. So this is exactly what I did. I just got a little bit closer, crouched down a little bit, and found this guy. And I really am so happy with that little detail that I was able to find.
He's so cute. I love that photo.
Thanks. And this is on one of those days that I believe I was with Birch when I was photographing this in Black Matters Plaza, of the fence right in front of the White House. Just an example of kind of a wide shot, a mid-ground shot, and the detail shot. The first image on the left is of these two people, and the one gentleman, he has a shirt that says "I can't breathe," and he's just creating this kind of memorial to George Floyd on the fence. And I just thought it was such a beautiful moment, and I loved the fresh flowers that he brought to hang up on the fence. And so I really, when I took this first picture, I didn't think that it expressed what I wanted to show in this scene. I just loved how it was like he was in the process of doing it. So I was able to capture his hands moving and him just like tearing off the streamer and then hanging it up on the fence. So I moved a little bit closer with my feet. Still not exactly what I wanted, but kind of a closer idea of what I was trying to get. I loved how his shoulder was kind of creating a frame for the flowers and for the word Floyd. But it wasn't until I got even closer. I think at this point I was standing almost side by side to him, and he was about to hang another streamer up. I don't know how he was about to hang it up, but I just love that little detail of his hand. And especially if you're from the DC area or you've been to Black Lives Matter Plaza, you get an idea of where you are. You can kind of see the White House in the background, but it's just that little detail of him bringing his hand up to hang more banners in memory of George Floyd, which I thought was just so intimate and so even more interesting to look at. And then, like I said before, living in DC, we take a lot of iconic postcard images, and this is one of them. There was a double rainbow that happened after the rain, and I was so excited to be able to capture that. I love puddles, so obviously I had to get down low to try to capture that. And I was excited to capture the rainbow, even in the puddle as well. But it wasn't until I grabbed that shot and I just went past the rainbow and got a little bit closer to the dome, where I felt like I could capture the rainbow and the dome together. And I think in this way, it kind of gives more meaning to the image with the rainbow behind a government building. So I just really think that there are two ways of looking at a scene, and there's no right or wrong way. It just gives you, it's just what the story is that you're trying to tell, or the reason why you're out taking pictures that day.
So this is actually something that I wanted to include because it was some of the best advice I got early in my photography career, is whether, I think if you're watching this, and there's probably a range of, if you enjoy landscape, if you enjoy street photography, if you enjoy portraiture, if you are really into food photography for your food blog, or whatever the subject is, whatever is in your frame, stop and ask yourself, what caught my eye? And my advice is, don't leave the scene until you have taken a step back and been able to take a photo that truly communicates to your viewer what originally caught your eye. And that's part of developing your creative eye. But whether it was a color, if it was a certain way the light hit the subject, if it was certain, the lines, something there made you stop and want to take a picture. And so it's a process of kind of dancing with the subject and finding a way to capture it. So I think the easiest way is to do that with an example. If you actually look at, so these two photos are not the photo that I went home with that did it for me, but it was when I was taking a walk. This is actually on Friday night. I noticed the row houses on U Street, and those are very, iconic, and you identify, you can identify that type of home with DC. And then in the same, minute or two, I saw this trombone player on the street, and his energy was just incredible. And so I was like, okay, like the row houses caught my eye and the trombone player caught my eye, but I wasn't, over the moon with either of these photos. And I knew that there was more there for me. I knew that there was a story to tell, especially with kind of the history of the jazz culture on U Street. And so if you go to the next shot, this was how, from my creative perspective, I wanted to blend the two. And I decided to position my body. I got down low. I switched my lens to my 70 to 200. And I used that background element to give context of where I was. And then I focused on the row houses and just put the trombone player in the foreground, and to really just communicate that scene that happened right after sunset. And then the next example is, it's actually kind of, I think, a good journey into how something can catch your eye and you don't know why, but then it will lead to an incredible photo. So I saw what caught my eye here was actually just the fountain. I was like, I've never taken a picture of this fountain here at the World War II Memorial. I've never gotten a shot that I love. So I started just taking pictures of the water, and like, that was fun, but it wasn't, didn't make me feel anything. And so I started to frame the water in the foreground and then focus on the Capitol in the background. I was like, okay, this is, more like it, but the light is what really spoke to me. And so as I was trying to just focus on the Capitol, in came a runner. And I realized then that I had a beautiful layered photo of the interesting water in the foreground, the runner in the mid, and then the background with the Washington Monument and the Capitol. And so something as simple as noticing a fountain can then lead to building out a much more meaningful moment for in a photo. And then lastly, sometimes it's hard to pinpoint what catches your eye, but in this example that was taken in June, body language is what spoke to me. And it was the layers of body language and emotion that was being expressed through body language that I had to move around and move my feet. And also I was changing my focal length to try and figure out, how do I give context and express this moment of, it felt like a very tense moment of protesters at the steps of the Lincoln. And this was when there was the National Park Service and the National Guard was here, and we were not allowed to go up to the Lincoln, which was just so foreign to me. And seeing then also the female National Park Service officer right in front of the Lincoln. Yeah, you can go ahead to the next thing. Kind of it is just communicating body language. But what I try and express when I'm taking a photo in asking myself, like, what caught my eye, is just to, once you know you have the photo, when you can find a way to let the viewer feel what you felt in that moment.
So next I want to talk about the emotional connection. It's really difficult to evoke emotions on a piece of paper or even on the computer screen or your phone screen or whatever the case is. And especially right now when we're going through this historic moment in history where all the streets are empty and we're encouraged to stay home, like how do we evoke emotions? And how do we especially do it through photography? So what I like to do for this is just to use my own emotions and identify them in the everyday life. So I'm not ashamed. So don't be ashamed of what you're feeling. If you're feeling confused, if you're feeling frustrated, whatever you're feeling that day, it's what led you to pick up your camera and to go outside. And I think it's really important to kind of find that emotion and connect with what you're seeing outside and bring it into your photograph. So in this first image, this was not in the beginning of quarantine. It was sort of in the middle when things got a little bit more relaxed and we were able to just be out a little bit more. My husband and I, we just decided to take a sunset walk around the Kennedy Center. And it was nothing special. It was just a way for us just to get some fresh air after being outside all day. And we were just walking around. Obviously, I had to bring my camera with me. And we were about to leave. And something about us leaving right then and there, I was like, I need to look back behind my shoulder real quick and just check out one last look of the Kennedy Center or the Reach before we left. And then I saw this couple just dancing in the middle of the sidewalk to no music, to wearing their plastic gloves, their PPE masks are, around their necks, and they were just enjoying the moment together. And it was just something really special about me being there with my husband and watching this couple enjoying that moment in time where I felt like I could feel their love. And I wanted to bring that intimate moment through my photographs. So that's why I chose to bring the tree in as a framing object, just because I wanted to show that there was some distance between us as well. Like I wanted to leave them with their intimate moment, for me and my husband, just to have like a beautiful sunset walk around a beautiful area of DC that was so special and so nice. And so recognizing human emotions through others and capturing that and bringing it into your film images can really drive in that emotional connection into your images. And in the second image, I photographed this last year at Rolling Thunder. And Rolling Thunder is just this event where every Memorial Day, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of motorcycles that come and take over the city, basically. And we're honoring our veterans that served in war. And so I was on one side of the street. I saw this lady on the other side of the street, and I must have seen her right when she looked up from her phone, and I saw her, and it was just that connection, we made immediate eye contact with each other. And so I brought up my camera to my eye, and I kind of looked at her like, is this okay? Like, can I take this picture? Even though we're inside, like across the street from each other, and there's so many people in between us, like on the streets, I kind of used that sign language, that universal symbol of, can I take your picture? She didn't do anything, or she didn't nod her head or anything, but she kind of gave me this look of confidence and of just, you can see how fierce she is. I mean, she's standing on top of a motorcycle like it's no thing. Like, I don't know anyone else who could do that. And you can tell she's just like tiny lady, but she just has so much power and so much confidence on top of that motorcycle. I love how the gentleman behind her is just looking at her. Everything about this image is pointing to her and just how fierce she is. So recognizing the emotion of her confidence and how she was feeling really just reinforced that emotional connection and human connection that we have as photographers and people. So when you're out taking pictures and photographing these emotions that you're feeling and you recognize on the streets as you're out going to take pictures, is to dig deep. How did that photo make you feel once you hit that shutter? And like Birch was saying, sometimes you just know automatically, like, I know I got this shot. This is what I was looking for. This was it.
So similar to the emotional connection is kind of the human moments. And this year, I think that there's been such gaps in feeling that in-person connection, that the camera has really been a permission slip to, go to a park or spend time with family outside from a distance and be able to take pictures and have those human moments that have become so much more special and meaningful for me personally, because we are experiencing so much through our screens these days. And so one thing I want to take a minute and talk about is kind of candid and pose portraits. And there's different, I think everyone has to know where they fall on the spectrum of comfort. And there's a way of knowing whether or not you have a willing subject. If there's someone, who wants to have their portrait taken, and someone who wants to pose for you and wants to be in front of the camera. And that's very different than when you are having a moment where you want to take, say, like a street portrait of someone, and they just immediately put their head down and don't want to be photographed. I think it's really important to know your audience, to be able to read the scene and know the comfort level of within yourself, but then also with your subject, and be respectful. It's very important to kind of know where you stand on like the etiquette of taking someone's portrait. And so there have been times, I think, that whether you are going to be this week, taking some portraits of your family for Thanksgiving, or you're finding candid moments when you're out on a walk and you're with your camera, to be aware of one thing that Angela and I talk about is kind of the type of energy you give is the energy you're going to receive. And I've had some moments this year through my camera lens that have been the most meaningful human connection moments, where I don't know someone at all, but it's like, I see you, and I am feeling that anxiety or that uncertainty or that joy, whatever the emotion may be. It's just that moment of connection that's really just such a release and so refreshing, and it just gives life in a different way. So a couple examples of this is one thing I wanted to talk about. I mentioned like posed portraits. So Angela said there's like a nonverbal language when you're out taking pictures. And the first is lifting up your camera and like pointing and being like, can I take your picture? And you'll get a head nod or you'll get a no. And it's just like, okay, thank you. But as often as possible, I try and get some sort of nonverbal consent to take someone's portrait, unless it's like a stride by or something like that, where I'm really not getting like their face. But I want to give the example of how to be patient and present in the moment to be able to give someone some nonverbal cues to create the photo that you want. And so none of these photos are the photo that I ended up really editing and feeling good about. But I wanted to show you my progression. So it started with, I saw this guy standing on the median holding up the flag. And I was like, well, I have to shoot that. So I went and I ran over and I took a photo of him from behind, and I was like, it's not quite the frame I was looking for. So then I went around and I did the front view, but he was standing there with his mask and just looked a little like, nervous. And I had already held up my camera and said, can I take your picture? And he gave the nod. So then I asked him, after I took that shot in the middle, I went like this, and I was like, just hold up the flag. And he did that, but he was off to the side and he was leaning and he wasn't centered. And I was like, this could be such a cool photo if I could just get him to pose a little differently for me. So then he put the flag down and I was like, hold on, could you, and I recentered him. Could you just step to the center? And I just used my hands, and he was like, okay, cool, I got it. And then he put the flag back up, and then the wind was blowing and it was flapping. And I just was like, okay, like I knew I was making him hold this flag up for too long. But as soon as the wind fell down and all of those things had come into place, I got this shot. And that was what I wanted. It was the people in the back, the people on the left are walking home from the White House. The people on the right are walking to the White House. And it was on November 7th. So again, that day where there's a lot of like joy and celebration circulating in the city. But it just goes to show what a little bit of nonverbal communication and patience can give you in terms of an image. And so then if you go to the next series, these are some examples where this year I was able to connect with some people that I don't even know, but I was able to get consent and have those real moments of, it feels like someone's just looking you in the eye, but they're looking through your camera lens. And the guy on the far left, I'll go through these quickly, but the guy on the left, this was the first day that I went out with my camera since being in lockdown. And I knew I had to get out and feel what was going on in the city. And I needed to experience it for myself, not through a screen. I didn't want to watch the news. I didn't want to be on Twitter anymore. I just had to walk down there and observe this scene. And there was this moment where we were all 6 feet apart taking a knee for George Floyd. And I turned around and this guy was looking me just dead in the eye. And if that was just such a tense, emotional, heartbreaking time in the city. And he didn't flinch when I had kind of nodded to get his permission to take his photo. And he even repositioned himself a little bit to be like, yes, please capture me. Please show the world what I'm feeling right now. And I remember tears streaming down my face after I took that photo, because I had not had an in-person eye-to-eye moment with someone since like February or whatever it may have been, of someone that I didn't know. And so then in the middle, this was one where I don't even know what those things on the street are called, but like the pedestrian things, so they make a cool repetition. I had crouched down and I knew I wanted a shot to catch the repetition of those. And I was just waiting for someone to enter my frame. This guy saw what I was doing and he kind of gave me a nod and walked in the frame and co-created the photo with me. He knew that I was waiting for someone to walk through. And then if you were to zoom in on this photo, you could see he's looking me like dead in the eye and was just such a willing subject. And then lastly, this girl is like one of my favorite photos of the year. I got the green light from her father to take her picture, and she was so curious. And I'll kind of let the photo speak for itself. You can interpret it as you wish, but I knelt down and got to her eye level. I think that it's really important to know the different perspectives of, if you take a photo from down below and you shoot up to someone, that can be a position of power. If you're at their eye level, then it just brings you into their world. It brings you into her perspective. And then shooting from above, there's a number of different reasons for doing that. But just knowing when you're taking a portrait, where you want to be and where you want to place your subject.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about resistance. It's something that we all go through, and especially during 2020, I know a lot of us felt a little unmotivated or just felt like they were in a creative slump. There's so many reasons why to not go out. Like, it could be the weather is gross, it's so hot, it's so cold, whatever the case is. And maybe it's even quarantine that we feel scared to go out. And so for me, the way that I like to kind of push through this is to identify the way the reason why I'm feeling this way, and forgive myself for that. You know, if it's because I feel like I'm in a creative slump and I'm not going to do great, that I just push myself to get out there and try to just envision a new image or envision something great that could happen when I go out to the photo shoot. So I just want to let you all know that it happens to everyone. Everyone feels some sort of resistance for whatever reason, and it shouldn't be the reason why you should stop taking pictures. It should be the reason why you need to push a little bit further and to get out there. It also helps to have accountability. Like Birch and I have mentioned multiple times in this presentation, that we will meet up. Even there will be times when like I don't want to wake up for sunrise because it's so early in the morning, but I know I'm meeting up with Birch, and so that's just my push of getting out there. And just know that when you do push yourself, 9 times out of 10 you will be rewarded for that push. Whoops, sorry. So this is an example of me pushing through resistance. There was a week or two in the summer where we were getting these crazy lightning storms that were happening in the city. And, you know, it's so easy to say, like, I'm really comfortable on my couch and I could just snuggle up here and just stay here and just let the storm pass. Or, you know, it's late at night, I go to bed early, and I just would rather just get that extra hour or 2 hours of sleep instead of going out to take pictures. Another cause for resistance, especially on this occasion, is I don't want to get wet. I don't want to get my camera wet. I don't want to come home with like damaged equipment. And so I'm just going to stay here. But I pushed through. I envisioned the type of image, or I envisioned the location of where I wanted to go take a picture. I knew that I wanted to take a picture at the Lincoln Memorial where I had shelter and I would be pretty much safe in case of lightning or anything like that happened. And I just set my tripod up. I was prepared for lightning to happen, and I am extremely grateful and happy that I went out on this day to capture it, because I've never seen lightning just crawl across the sky like this. It was one of the coolest lightning experiences that I've had. And it's exciting, but it's also really dangerous too. And that's just something that I had to push through to go and take that picture. So there has never been a time where I was feeling that resistance that I wish I hadn't done that. Whether it was just, I get a really cool picture like that lightning shot, or I just come out with something so unexpected, or even if it was just a nice day and I was able to go out on a 30-minute walk, that is good enough reason for me to go out and just practice my creativity and practice what my compositions and seeing what's in front of me. I never regret a time where I'm out with my camera. And I think it's just important to recognize that resistance happens to everyone and that we need to just push through.
So just real quick before we get into the last two, I just want to mention, you know, it is like a little bit past 1:20. And so we are going to, Angela and I are both willing to go over for the Q&A section. And you know, we have until I think about like 2 o'clock or so. So if you have questions, we will definitely answer them. But if you need to head out at 1:30, just we're trying to be mindful of that. And so I want to get into when you have a familiar subject and you want to give it a fresh perspective. So I think this is really common this year, where maybe you're in the same, you know, you've been at home a lot, or you are sticking to your neighborhood, you're sticking to things that are really, you know, familiar to you and not going to a lot of new places. How do you get a fresh perspective on that? And so there's something here that it's one of my favorite things to talk about, because I love to go to some of the same places and surprise myself as to how I can capture it differently and what I see that day, and how the weather, the seasons, the mood, everything can shape how you provide a fresh perspective. And so one thing that I think, Angela, if you go to the next slide, that I wanted to share with you guys is to give yourself permission to not care what anyone else thinks. It's easier said than done, but I have really accepted that probably 4 or 5 years ago, like I have no shame when it comes to getting the shot. I have been known to just make myself look silly, and it's totally worth it. But when you're out taking pictures, whether it's doing some street photography or you're out with your friends even, and you want to stop and stand on the street corner and take a photo, and you are standing there as the light continues to change time and time again, and you're just waiting for the same photo. People are curious. Humans are curious beings. And so be comfortable with people stopping and staring at you and wondering what you're doing. My favorite is when someone will come up from behind you and look and just kind of try and see what does this person see that's making them stand there for like 10 minutes. And people that will pull out their phone and just take a picture to see if they can understand what's going on. It's okay if people look at you. It's okay if you feel silly. Just give yourself permission to like forget that and know that it will be worth it. So this is actually an IGDC event that I was at. It was sunrise of the cherry blossoms, I think in 2018. Or no, I'm sorry, 2019, because it was just this year that we didn't go to the cherry blossoms. And if you can see in the photo on the left, all the photographers that were lined up, like it was thick in the number of people that were there. And what kept catching my eye was the reflection of the cherry blossoms on the water. And I was like, how do I get this? And I knew I had to get down low. So it's a little trick you can do with your phone or with your camera, is to put the lens as close as possible to water or some sort of source of a reflection, and you'll be able to frame a mirror image like this. And so Angela was behind me, my friends Anna and Ann were there, and I was like, can you guys just like hold on to my backpack? I really don't want to fall into the tidal basin, it's cold. And I leaned over the edge, and I remember people were just staring at me like, what is that girl doing? But I knew the photo was there. And so this is what I walked away with in terms of the photo on the left. And then the next one, again, I don't necessarily recommend doing this, but because you're going to have to dry clean your clothes, but I was at the Lincoln Memorial for sunrise, and rarely do I step into the back of the Lincoln near Abe and photograph the sun coming up from there. But that day, for some reason, I was drawn to the back. And what was catching my eye was the way the light was hitting the ground. It was beautiful. So I kept trying to get the shot by putting my camera down on the floor and taking it, but I couldn't immerse myself in the moment to get it. So I was like, I have to look through my viewfinder. So forget it. I'm getting on my belly. I'm going to lay down. And you can see the guy staring at me like, what is that girl doing? But for me, it was totally worth it. And as I was laying there, just changing my aperture to get the sun flare, a runner came up and entered the frame. And so it just was kind of like the cherry on top for me.
So when all else fails, if any of these tips don't resonate with you or don't work out for you on your photo shoot, this is something that I highly recommend doing, is just following the light. Photography literally means writing with light, and that's exactly what you're doing every time you hit the shutter. So when you're out and nothing is inspiring you or nothing is catching your eye, nothing is really working for you, I just recommend following the light. When you follow the light, it just makes everything glow. Like the other day when Birch and I met up to talk about this workshop, we were walking and I saw this bus just like glow in the early morning sunlight. I was like, too bad that's a bus. I wish it was something a little bit more interesting, but just the way that things can just light up and glow is so beautiful, especially when you're out during the golden hours, sunrise, sunset, blue hour. It's just so beautiful just to see how lighting can change so much in just a mundane scene and make it extraordinary. So one thing I highly recommend when you're out taking pictures is just to be flexible. I kind of stopped using my tripod as much just because I felt like I was boggled down by having to, undo all of my legs on my tripod and, moving it around and just carrying it with me, I felt a little heavy by having my tripod all the time. So I kind of stopped carrying my tripod around just so that I could remain flexible and chasing the light, chasing what interests me, and just watching everything glow. So this image was taken earlier this year when we had our only snow from the season, and this was taken in Manassas, where I was allowed to fly my drone. And I'd flown around for a little bit. You can see on the image on the left, and nothing was really interesting me. I was just waiting for something to happen, just clicking along while I was just searching for my composition or anything like that. And I actually brought my drone down and started taking pictures with my regular Sony camera. Then probably like 10 minutes later, the sun started peeking over the horizon, and I could see just like this beautiful orange pinkish glow that was happening on the top of the tree. And I just packed away my camera and brought my drone back up. And you can see how these two images were probably taken about 15, 20 minutes at different times, like separated. But it's just the world of difference when you follow the light and just capture what the light, sunlight, or whatever kind of light source you're using is highlighting. It just makes everything so much more interesting to look at. And then this image I captured at the Dumbarton Oaks in the Orangery. And this could have been just like a mundane scene of these beautiful plants and all the vines on the walls and things like that. But I had captured this probably around this time, and just in the middle of the day when it was bright sunshine day. It was all, the light was just streaming down the roof, or just streaming down through the roof, through all the cracks in the wall or in the roof. And it was casting this beautiful shadow on the plants and even on the floor itself. And I think that if it wasn't for all those shadows on the ground and giving all four sides and corners of this image some purpose and something to look at, that this image wouldn't be as successful. I think that it would have been, you kind of would question why I would have taken this image, but it was just the light and the shadows playing with each other and interacting that made this image even more interesting to look at. And lastly, you can play with how you use the light too. So this image was taken earlier this year before COVID or lockdown, and I was out, I didn't have any intentions of really coming to the monument. I was lucky that I had my camera with me, and I was just out. I noticed the fog at nighttime, and so I just had to go to the Washington Monument. I had taken an image very similar to this, but in the daytime, maybe like 2 or 3 days before, and I just wanted to take the same image at nighttime with the fog and just see how those two images interacted with each other and the differences between the two. And I just love how the light is at the Washington Monument, but it's behind these people. So it's backlighting them and just making these beautiful silhouettes. And it's just very interesting how light can make the world of difference in your images. So when nothing else is working, follow light. And if this presentation didn't give you any tips or advice at all, we want to just hone in that give yourself permission to try new things. You can see that Birch and I, we started off in one area in photography at the beginning of the year, and just this whole journey and this whole process of taking pictures during the protests and during all these marches and things like that has really given us permission to try new things that we would never have tried if it wasn't for this time of year or this historic moment in history. Did you want to add something to that, Birch?
No, I would say that it's also just kind of finding some of the things that like make you uncomfortable. It's usually that thing that makes you uncomfortable that you should go after and try. And so there's been a lot of moments where I've been uncomfortable of taking a portrait or whatever it may be, but I've always thanked myself for doing it. So I hope it's, whether it's one tip or just a combination, that you can apply to a single photo, that you're able to take it and run with them.
So next we have a 5-minute break built in. I don't know if we still want to do that or if we just wanted to kind of push through because we still have one more image each that we wanted to talk about. Holly, what do you think?
I'm fine to push through if everybody feels, I mean, I think it's fine to just proceed.
Okay. Okay, so we just wanted to take a moment just to, you've seen a whole collection of our images and what we have done in the past with photography. And so these are the two images, each of us picked an image that really was so meaningful to us in 2020 and just wanted to share our images. So this image I took on July 4th this past year, and this image is so meaningful to me because 2020 really gave me permission to carry my camera everywhere I went. Like I would carry my camera to the grocery store. I would carry my camera to walk my dog. I would carry my camera for whatever occasion. Just anytime I left my house, I really wanted to capture everything that was happening in front of me just because COVID and quarantine and everything, I was feeling so many mixed emotions and I wanted to document that in life. And so this was taken on July 4th, Independence Day. And usually on Independence Day, you will find me at the National Mall taking pictures of the fireworks with the monuments and things like that. But this year, and my family would always stay home and have a barbecue and celebrate on their own, and I'd be the only one out there by myself. But this year I decided to stay back with my family and bring my camera to them and captured the moments that they experience, all these emotions and feelings that they experience every time that I'm not there on July 4th. And I was just so happy to be there to watch like my nephews and nieces play with the fireworks and watch fireworks. And so this is my little niece, and we had played with the sparklers and things like that. And when it was time for like the real fireworks to happen, she wasn't as enthusiastic or excited about that. So I just thought this perfectly encapsulated what it was like just hanging out with my family on 4th of July and just my permission to carry my camera around everywhere I went. I just wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for everything that has happened this year.
And then something that's really been meaningful for me is kind of the permission to venture into photojournalism a little bit more this year. And figure out what that means for me, because I kind of went into the year like, all right, I'm a freelance photographer. I'm going to figure out what kind of like commercial work I want to do. Am I going to do portraits? And what has really been the most meaningful to me has been these moments of documenting life that's happening right outside the door. And so this was election night, and I was with Angela right outside the White House, and everyone was looking around at one another, like looking for a cue of an emotion or how are you doing over there? Like, it was just like, it was a moment of uncertainty. And I kept looking up, down, all around, and I saw these two men they're with ABC News, I believe. And they were hanging outside the window just with that look of patience and waiting for something to happen. And I framed the sign of Black Lives Matter Plaza in the foreground to give context. Otherwise, you wouldn't know where they are necessarily. And so it was actually cool. IGDC posted this photo the next morning, and the men in the photo were identified. And so, yeah, overall, it's just kind of giving myself permission to venture into a new area of photography that's just been this like incredible, exciting world.
So just to discuss, or just to wrap things up, your assignment for next week, should you choose to accept, is to just think about and process everything that we had talked about in this presentation, in this workshop, and give yourself permission to go and maybe jump out of your comfort zone and capture your own images that are meaningful to you. I know this week we have Thanksgiving, so maybe that's an opportunity to capture your family, or just take a neighborhood walk at sunset. It's just a beautiful lighting and time of day just to get out and explore with your camera. So Birch and I would like you to take one picture and try to encapsulate one of the methods we have talked about today, and maybe and then emailing it to us at birchandangela@gmail.com And maybe if you can add 1 or 2 sentences about your image. I'm not sure how many people will be submitting. So if we can't get everybody to discuss, maybe we can just read out the sentences that you email to us. And we would like to have that done by Saturday at 6 p.m. So just so we can pull them all together and create a presentation so that we can have this roundtable discussion of your images.
I was just going to add, if you want to remain anonymous, that's cool too.
Yeah.
You can send the photo, and if you just want to share it with us and you don't want it to be shared, that's fine. Or if you want it to be shared and you don't want us to put your name and you don't want to speak to it, like totally respect your privacy on that. But just if you want to have a conversation with us on the side, that's cool too.
Yeah, definitely note that you want to be anonymous in the email, and we'll be sure to do that in the presentation. And thank you so much for joining us. Both of us had so much fun putting this together and collaborating and just brainstorming all these ideas. I feel like I've learned so much, and just going through all of our old images brought back so many memories of 2020 and some beautiful experiences. So this is just our contact information. If you wanted to email us separately, you can reach us here. Our Instagrams are there. If you have any technical questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us, or you can email us both at birchandangela@gmail.com.
Thank you so much. That was so fascinating, and I loved seeing your progress and your the emotional stories behind each photograph. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to see what people capture next week. We have a couple questions, so I'm just gonna field them to each of you. I think I want to start out with this question for Angela. I know you're both local, so you can both speak to this, but what advice can you give to new photographers that don't know the city well? We have a lot of transient people that come through the city. Like, what is the best advice you can give to someone who wants to get out and capture DC?
I think for me, it's just take your time. Don't rush it. Just find a place that interests you and just take your time exploring. You know, you don't even necessarily have to go at the particular time of day, like sunrise or sunset or anything like that. Just whenever you're free, just be really present and try to figure out what captures your attention about that area, and be really present of what is going around you. Especially if you're just new to the area, I think it's great just to walk around with your camera, take your time, and, you know, hit each neighborhood or each monument or whatever with a camera, and being really present and taking your time to photograph those things.
I would say Angela would never shout this out herself, so I'll do it for her, but she wrote a book called Snap DC, and it is a step-by-step guide from parking to like time of day to hit different locations, and it has all the sweet spots and all of the tricks she has in her bag. So you could check that out too.
Good shout out. I was trying to lead into that. She's being modest. Okay, so another good question that we've seen is, oftentimes I only have my iPhone with me, and I really enjoy taking photos with it, but very often people don't take you seriously when they learn that you take photos with your mobile phone. What do you think about that, and what can you say to that?
That's a good question. Honestly, the camera phones these days are something that are not to kind of tilt your head up at. The technology is something that it really is putting a powerful camera in your pocket, and that's actually, my iPhone is where I really started. I've gone back through my camera roll from before I had my own camera, and I could see my eye developing along the way. So kind of along the same lines of forget what other people think and take a minute to figure out how it's helping you develop your own creative eye. And it is the most readily available tool that we all have to take pictures. So there are times when I'm out on a walk, just because like going on walks is the way of life right now, that I don't take my camera with me, and I just have my camera phone. It's still not a reason to not take the photo. So if I see something, I'm absolutely, I see it honestly as a challenge like, I think it's more difficult sometimes to frame something on a camera phone. So go for it. Do you.
I will say that for me, my camera phone is also my way of note taking. And just like, instead of just saying like, oh, I want to be on this street, like at this time of day because the light hits, the monument so beautifully, I'll just take pictures with my notes, and I have a little folder where I keep all of those kind of note pictures or inspiration or anything like that in that folder. So when I am feeling kind of resistance to going out, I'll just look through those and hype myself up to go take some more photos, and remembering those kind of notes that I take with my phone to go out and photograph those places again.
I agree. And I just to add to this, when we first started IGDC, we oftentimes got the same reaction from photographers who solely shot with a camera, that they didn't take us seriously and they didn't see the importance of Instagram, and they didn't get it. But since we've been doing this, pretty much all those people have turned around and have embraced Instagram and their iPhone cameras. So I think it just takes some people a little time, but I think the respect for both tools is there. And I think as long as you remember that the best camera you have is the one that you have on you, and don't shy away from taking photos with whatever you have, because the camera phone is a terrific camera and a good tool, and you don't want to miss an opportunity because you're intimidated that someone might not respect it. To follow up on that question, we had another question kind of flows into this question. Any tips for getting nonverbal permission when holding a phone instead of a camera?
Ooh, trying to think.
I kind of would just act like it was my actual camera. I would just hold up my phone and point to the lenses and like, is this okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs up is key.
Yeah, like, can I do this? Is this okay? Everybody will pretty much understand what you're going through or what you're trying to do, and so it's just out of respect to ask if you're able to. So
I think
pretty much
there's
the same as the camera.
Yeah, the language would still apply, and sometimes there's that moment of like maybe thinking that because you have a camera, like a professional camera, that you have more of a reason to be taking their photo. But I think that just as long as you're respectful and you can read how they're receiving it, you'll know very quickly if someone gives you kind of the nod or if they kind of say, no, I'm okay. And I would say like 99 times out of 100, I get the thumbs up. Like, yeah, go ahead. That's cool. Rarely does someone say, no, thank you.
Okay, one more question we've got. Can you recommend a photography workshop or class that has helped you improve your own technique, especially capturing light?
For me, I don't necessarily know of any classes or workshop in general, but I just feel like that one of the best things about photography is that I'm always a student. There's always something new that I can learn, some new technique or some new ideas and things like that. So for me personally, I like reading a lot. I like reading, and so I read photo books. I was just reading this morning, The Americans, and I also enjoy watching YouTube videos of other photographers. And so that has helped me in my journey of just improving my photography and seeing things differently. What about you, Birch?
Yeah, I did not, I didn't go to school for photography. As I mentioned, my mom did, and I learned a lot from her, but YouTube is your best friend. If there is anything you would like to learn when it comes to lighting, even for a specific, whether it's the time of day, if it's artificial lighting, if you want to get into flashes and strobes and constant lights, or you want to learn a little bit more about your particular camera and lenses and all of that, like YouTube has been so incredible in terms of teaching myself how to do certain things. Two other things I would say, the way I started was I met up with one photographer. I honestly her name is Rachel something. I if you're interested, I could follow up with that. But when I first got my camera, I hired a local photographer to meet me at in a hotel lobby. And I said, could you teach me for 1 hour what does shutter speed mean? What does aperture mean? What is ISO? Like, take me through the fundamentals, because I need someone to just break it down for me. I did that. And then I took that and I ran with it. And then from there, the other piece other than YouTube, I would say, is building the community as much as possible. If you surround yourself with other people who are passionate about this, it's contagious. It is absolutely like having my closest friends over the past few years also be photographers has really supported my journey and helped me learn from them. We build on each other. We send our photos to each other. We get feedback, criticism. It's just a constant journey of learning. And so those have really been two of my things that have been really impactful to my learning process.
One last thing I'd like to say is that both Birch and I do offer one-on-one workshops, or we've never done a workshop together, but that's something fun that we had actually talked about that we could do together. But both of us do offer one-on-one just photo walks where we will talk about this more detailed in person.
Mm-hmm.
Great. What are 2 to 3 essentials you grab to take with you on a photo walk besides your camera?
And besides lenses and stuff, like besides
our equipment?
I think lenses included. If you take multiple lenses, which ones and why? Do you take a tripod, Angela? I know we don't see you with your tripod as much as you mentioned.
My favorite, it depends what I'm shooting. Like if I'm out shooting protests and things like that, I love my 35 millimeter prime lens, just because I can get in close and not have to worry about focusing in. Like I have to focus with my legs. So I love my 35 millimeter when I'm out shooting protests, but my favorite lens overall is just my 70-200. You can just get some really nice detailed and close-up shots from a distance. So those are 2 of my favorite lenses.
Yeah, so my go-to for the past, really since I started, my go-to has been a 24-70 millimeter lens. Angela and I both shoot with Sony, and so I have subscribed to their G Master lenses. They're incredible. And the 24-70 has really been my workhorse. But then the 70-200 is just like my sweet spot. It's what I absolutely love. It also this year has helped me feel safe to be able to have a telephoto lens there. I can capture things from a distance and not have to be in the middle of the crowd. And I have also really picked up on a 90 millimeter. I'm starting to venture into the world of being more of a prime shooter, which has, I've heard that you're either a prime shooter or you like to have the zoom lens. But and I was definitely identifying myself as more of a zoom lens before, but now I see the beauty of primes and moving your feet. Aside from that, have water and snacks, because that should not be the reason to bring you home.
Exactly.
And
that's appropriate for the weather.
Yeah, weather. Oh, that's key in terms of gear. Especially as we're going into the colder months, you have to stay warm. Get toe warmers. Get the gloves that keep your hands warm, because that's real. Like where you can hardly feel your finger hitting the shutter button anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. One follow-up was, what cameras do you both use and why? I think you both just touched on that briefly. You're both Sony users, correct?
We both have the A7R3 too, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's, I started with the A6000 and then the A7 II. Now I have the A7R3. It's a full frame camera from Sony, and Sony has the line of mirrorless that are just awesome. I could not be happier with them. And the reason that we both have the R is because of the higher resolution. And so you get more megapixels. Whereas if that's really for a lot of the print work that we do. We both sell a lot of prints. And so you want to have a higher resolution for some of the commercial prints that we do.
And do you primarily use manual focus? or does it change with what you're shooting?
You want to take that, Angela?
For me, it changes. Like if I'm in a protest or march, then I do shoot autofocus with that. But if I just need a little bit more practice with the manual focusing in order for me to feel comfortable with so much fast action things moving in front of me. But primarily, yeah, autofocus.
So if it's something where it's stationary and I'm focusing on like the photo where I was explaining that I was focusing on the Capitol building, for example, like that is one where I will manually focus and dial in till I see that it is like right on that sweet spot of focus. And then I'll scan the frame to make sure everything that I want is in focus. If the subject is moving, then I absolutely will go into the autofocus. And with our Sony cameras, there is the continuous focus where, you know, someone could be on a bike going by and it'll follow that moving object. But then also it's one of the benefits is that there's like face recognition, and I find that really helpful if we say you're at like I use it like whether you're at the Women's March or a protest or something like that, so that you can quickly point your camera and it will automatically recognize a face. And I also use that for like my family photo shoots. And if I'm, you know, working on a portrait session, it will be a quick autofocus for a portrait.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. And thank you, Phillips Collection. Just a few housekeeping things at the top of the chat. I did include both of their Instagram handles and their websites. So if you want to check them out any further on different channels, that's there for you. And then you all have put together your own email account for this class. So they're available to you, which is extremely helpful and very kind. So thank you very much for that. If you want to just give us the address again.
It's birchandangela@gmail.com.
Great, we can check it.
Yeah.
So send your photos for your homework assignment to that email address.
And then everyone will receive an email on Tuesday from me, and that email will include a link to this recording, but also it'll include that email address for Birch and Angela so that you guys can send them your images.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And thanks for everybody for participating.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us, Miguel and Holly, for making the connection to Phillips Collection. And thank you, all of you who gave us a piece of your Sunday and wanted to tune in and listen to our stories. And I hope you guys took something that you'll be able to apply directly to your photography.
Ditto. Thank you, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, have a great week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.